What's up troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today we have a brand new trailer and new information about Battlefield 1 that has released. Now in today's video, alongside all the important announcements, I'm going to be going through the trailer frame by frame and having a look at all of the new things that we can see in this trailer and analysing it by detail. So first and foremost, there is a confirmed open beta date of August 31st for all players, and I do believe early inside access players, the BF insiders, will get a day or two before the open beta actually releases to the general public. The open beta will include a brand new map, Sinour Desert, which is showcased in the trailer and will feature Conquest and Rush, which is now a 24 player mode. Rush works a bit like the AT-AT mode of Star Wars Battlefront, where players will be attacking and defending telegraph posts. These telegraph posts can be used to call in artillery strikes. The defenders can deny the attackers their position by disarming the explosives they plant on the telegraph positions, and the attackers have to plant the explosives on those positions. Should all of them be destroyed, the defenders must fall back to the next sector and protect the next set of telegraph posts, much like traditional Rush. So now let's dive into the trailer and analyse it in great detail. So what's worth noting in the opening frames? Well, first and foremost, we have the brand new map Sinour Desert, but what's important to note here is that there is actually dynamic weather taking place at a greater scale. Many of you would have played Gulf of Oman from Battlefield 4 with a Sandstorm. Well, the exact same thing happens on this exact map, and you'll see it actually roll in later on in the trailer. Alongside this, we have the first instance of a horse which is no longer mounted, and everybody was kind of interested to see what would happen to these horses when nobody was actually riding them, and by the looks of things, they appear to just wander off into the distance. In the next few frames, what's notable is we have the first soldier on horseback viewable in gameplay, and they are wielding a sword. And by the looks of things, melee takedowns from mounted horses will be a thing in the game, otherwise it probably wouldn't have been shown off in the trailer. He's using a traditional cavalryman horse during this era, and likely is a soldier from the Ottoman Empire due to the traditional attire that he is wearing. Next, we get our first detailed look at the armoured train which will be featuring on this map, and it's believed that this is going to be a reinforcement as opposed to something which is on the map at a consistent rate. But what's interesting to note here is not only does this thing appear to have cannon emplacements, it also appears to have pillbox emplacements for machine guns or potentially even infantry to get in and fire from. So alongside the first instance of a player mounting a horse, we have the first top-down view of Sinour Desert. Now this map actually features a village, and it's off the east of El Jafar as noted on the website. Now the village is called Bir El Mazar, and it appears that all infantry focused gameplay is going to be 100% focused to this region. Now alongside that, we have the mountainous terrain in the backdrop, and it really gives you a sense of scope just as to how huge this map is. It looks like feasibly it could be one of the largest maps in the game. Now this mountainous terrain, although not 100% certain it will be accessible to infantry, this is primarily for use of aircraft when it comes to dogfights and when it comes to tactical maneuvers between the rocks. In this scene, we have lots of minor details to pick up on. First and foremost, this is a British troop. He is using a Trench Model 1897 shotgun, which was traditional in World War I. Now, alongside this, the infantryman in front of him who is on the horse is actually a British officer, and this is the first ever instance of this uniform that we have actually seen in the game because it wasn't noticeable in the actual alpha itself. Now, it's 100% clear that this is a British officer due to the signature cap that he is wearing. This cap is only worn by officers of the British Empire, and he appears to be leading the charge, as you would anticipate of a cinematic-y trailer and a heroic officer riding into battle and all that good stuff. Now, this scene is absolutely huge and rich with detail, and we get our first look at the ruins and the village that is supposed to exist in this map, and it looks incredibly wide-ranging and very traversable. There's varying different levels of terrain, lots of different sight lines, and varying levels of height, so you can imagine this thing is going to be a middle-range powerhouse kind of map. But alongside that, the key details to notice is that this appears to be the third-person view from the perspective of the person on the horse, and considering third-person views are available on all other vehicles, vehicles, it's likely third-person views will be available on horsetop as well. Now, in this scene, he's actually wielding his sword, or taking his sword out of his holster, and it appears that wielding a sword will be the primary method of attack through horses. But what's interesting to note is that he appears to have his rifle holstered, or at least he starts putting it down, and then he wields the sword. So it's likely that we might actually be able to use our primary weapons from horseback, which would be very interesting. There's even more rich detail when we see the horses from the opposite perspective of the soldiers from the Ottoman Empire, and what's interesting to note here is that there's actually a lot of destruction on this map, particularly around the pillars. But alongside that, horses appear to be able to jump and vault at demand, so I imagine this is going to be a key on your keyboard or on your controller that you can press to initiate a jump or get across terrain. And the weapon he appears to be using is a Beretta M1918. So you probably did exactly what I did when you saw somebody take a sniper bullet to the head and go, what the fuck? Now this is Armour Bastard. Now, more formally, he's one of 3 elite classes, quote unquote, available in Battlefield 1. There are 3 elite classes. One of them is a flame trooper, of which we've already seen using a flamethrower. One of them is a sentry, which is Armour Bastard right here, who has thick armor plates. And the last one is called a tank hunter, who has an anti-tank rifle. So these are 3 elite classes, and I can imagine there's going to be a limited amount of them available on the battlefield at any one point. In this next view we have of Armour Bastard, he is actually using an MG1508, and this is an incredibly heavy machine gun, and definitely not one that you're really meant to be picking up in the grand scheme of things. It's got a drum magazine of roughly 200 to 300 bullets, and this is going to make this player incredibly slow. Although he will be an elite class, quote unquote, it's very likely that this machine gun is going to be both A, very accurate, and B, the character as a whole is going to be very slow, but on the bright side of things, he can take a sniper to the face. So from our first perspective of Armour Bastard, we've first actually seen somebody get killed whilst on a horse, and it appears the horse has too been killed. Now, it's quite interesting to note that lots of people were wondering how this would work, whether it be sort of free-flowing and dynamic, or what exactly would happen. And by the looks of things, this appears to be a preset animation of the horse diving forward, and some level of freedom when the player actually falls off the back of the horse. And it's not actually guaranteed as to whether or not the player will die when falling off of horseback, or just sustain a certain amount of damage. But it's likely, considering the machine gun being thrown his way, both of them were likely killed at this very same instance. And it also goes to show again more scale of this map. We have lots of mountainous terrain in the background and lots of very visible pathways on the ground, just showing just how huge this thing could potentially be. Now, freeze frame here, we actually have a pretty curious device. Now, this appears to be a Springfield 1903 rifle. I may be slightly wrong, but what's interesting is the attachment that it's using. The attachment is called the Pedersen device, which was developed for the M1903 Springfield rifle and allowed troops to fire 30 caliber 7.62mm pistol ammo at semi-automatic mode and effectively convert a rifle into a submachine gun or automatic rifle. So it's likely this is going to have some kind of weapon variant that will allow you to turn a Springfield into a fully auto weapon, as we've seen before with other weapons in the alpha. He then switches to a pistol, which is actually the Belgium version of a Luger pistol, which is available quite widely in World War I. Now, in the next couple of frames, there's not really much interesting other than huge action scenes and lots going on, but what I found was interesting to note is how fast the horses are going. They appear to be maintaining, if not slightly behind, the speed of an unarmoured car, which means that they might actually be quite quick in Battlefield 1. Moving on to the next scene, we get our first glimpse at the village in Sinour Desert, and what's interesting to note here is not only do we have a soldier not only sporting the Springfield 1903, but we also have a first look at the kind of backdrop to this map alongside some other little details here and there. So first and foremost, this village is actually a separate segment to the ruins previously, and the train track appears to run all the way alongside the face of this map. Now, this appears to have lots of different buildings in it, a long amount of collectives alongside a main road straight down the middle, and I imagine this is going to prompt pretty huge infantry to infantry combat. But another key detail to point out is that the tank, the land ship in the corner, is actually using a desert camo, so it will appear that desert camos are fully available for land ships. Moving on, we get a slightly wider view of the village itself, and the player is actually using a machine gun, which was already confirmed in my previous video when we looked at the teaser trailer. But what's interesting to note in this scene is the explosion that appears to originate from the ground, and after going through it frame by frame, I didn't actually notice any incoming shell or any kind of shell coming in from above, so I can only presume that that's some kind of explosive, potentially TNT. That's the only thing that comes to mind, and it's quite interesting to note that TNT can produce that huge an explosion. The actual size of the thing eventually envelops the side of an entire building, so it's just something to note that potentially TNT is as powerful as this explosion that you've just seen. Next, we get a look at the train at a slightly different angle, and this appears to have 3 different cannon emplacements, although they seem to be using different nozzles. It's very likely that some of these could potentially be anti-air cannons, alongside some ground cannons of a smaller millimeter variety. In the next scene, we actually see the first use of the cannon as an anti-aircraft cannon, which I imagine there will be a few of them dotted around on the train. The explosion that hits the bomber from above actually originates from the blast that you can see in the bottom left of your screen as the cannon fires. Although I couldn't get a clear glimpse of what the pistol he was using was, I have a small theory that it is a bell holler pistol, which is traditional of the Ottoman Empire during this era, but of course I cannot confirm that completely. Moving along, the land ship in this frame appears to be using a different cannon to the ones in the Alpha. In the Alpha, the land ship had a very slow frontal cannon, but this one has a much faster one, moving with a slightly less explosive impact. Moving along and looking at horseback, what's interesting about this scene is that it appears that the player directly in front of you is actually throwing a grenade from horseback, so you will be able to throw a grenade. This appears to be a light anti-tank grenade or a tank grenade that is actually thrown from horseback. So in theory, if it's a light anti-tank grenade, it would account for grenades being throwable, but if it's a full tank grenade, it potentially accounts for gadgets being usable on the back of the horse. And finally, in this scene, we get a first look at the Sandstorm rolling in, which I can imagine is going to be a nightmare for pilots and a nightmare for sniper rifles, similarly to how the fog acted in St. Quentin's Scar, but probably a lot worse. Now, I've hit the freeze frame again because there appears to be a different map showcased in this scene here. Now, this doesn't look like Sinour Desert, and if it is, then it's actually a lower lighting level, so it appears dynamic lighting and weather is also a thing. So, this is either a brand new map, and my reason for that is because if you look to the top left of your screen, there appears to be castles or some kind of old abandoned castle set up there. But if it is Sinour Desert, then it appears that dynamic weather will be a thing, and it appears sunsets and sunrises are very likely during the duration of the game. Freeze frame again, and we finally have our first glimpse of urban combat, and this is something I've been looking forward to, having sort of close quarters face-to-face combat in towns, and this appears to be the map known as Amiens in Battlefield 1, which is of course a French town. Now, I'm quite interested for this because if this is a map, it will likely be very, very destructible. If it's an urban environment, God knows what the terrain's going to be like after a tank gets through with it. Now, this bomber appears to be dropping torpedo-based bombs that will drop into the water and then travel for a short period of time, as you can see at the propeller on the back. And this is likely going to be used for bombing runs against vehicles primarily on the water, specifically giant-ass attack boats like this. So this final scene in the trailer is actually part of the campaign, because the campaign is the only part that features female soldiers in the game, and it references Lawrence of Arabia, which is available as a pre-order multiplayer DLC pack, so I imagine we're going to see a bit more of that being brought to light in the next few weeks. But that's about it for this trailer analysis, guys. If there was anything that you particularly liked, or if you just generally enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, Make sure you give it a share, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon with some more Battlefield 1 hype and news, and of course lots of open beta when it comes.